So we couldn't have a better guest on than Michael Malice, best-selling author. He's written so many books I can't get into it all. Michael Malice on Twitter, michaelmalice.com. I always ask, you've been on a couple times, but I've always asked the questions. You're the expert. What do you want to tackle first? Just watching this spectacle, because I've got 4 children, and I'm just, it's like, you watch our media, you think Trump ran North Korea. You know, it's just, I mean, what do you, as a North Korean expert, take away from this?
What you hit the nail on the head, Alex. Watching the people in the press talk about how, well, Trump said there's a red line, and they're basically daring him not to have nuclear war with North Korea is absolutely mind-boggling and terrifying. Chuck Schumer made a comment. He goes, this kind of when Trump's responded to Kim Jong-un in similar language, he said, this reckless rhetoric isn't going to help matters. It's like, well, non-reckless rhetoric is what got us to this place to begin with. Chuck Schumer doesn't know what to do about North Korea. I don't blame him.
We've been appeasing since 1953. I mean, how long does this go on?
If you don't know what to do, his immediate reaction is to attack the president. This is not a partisan issue. If you have a hell on earth, as you correctly said, and they're acquiring nukes and threatening us, what's that have to do with Democrat versus Republican? I mean, the safety of the citizenry and actually caring about the North Korean people themselves, that shouldn't have anything to do with political parties.
In fact, I can't even believe it. Like, where's the instincts? I mean, I don't even believe this is happening.
Yeah, it's terrifying. See, they like to say Kim Jong-un is crazy, and he's a very, very evil man. But what's crazier is how people are tripping over their own feet, desperate to get on TV, to make this as escalated as quickly as possible.
Exactly. That's why I've tried to de-escalate and point out, because it's like Trump's going to fail. He called his bluff. Oh, there's going to be nuclear war. I mean, it's like, it's crazy. I don't know. At this point, I have nothing to say. I finally, in 22 years on air, I have reached Michael Malice at a point where I don't know what to say anymore.
You got to get that fidget spinner out, Alex.
That's a viral video.
In all seriousness, North Korea, let's take a deep breath. During the Cold War, we had hundreds, if not thousands, of nuclear missiles pointing directly at us and our allies in Europe, right? And we worked through that, and we lived through that. The fact that...
And whether you were Republican or Democrat, you
right.
were an American.
Yes, and now that they have nukes and they've been threatening us for decades. 2 years ago, they released a photo of Kim Jong-un in front of his computer, and behind him on the whiteboard, he was nuking Austin. My friend called me. They go, are they going to nuke Austin? I
remember that 2 years ago. I live here, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, relax. You can still go to South by. It's going to be fine. So now that they've gone from Austin to Guam, people are like, well, we got to nuke them already. And you know what's even really scary? Watching a lot of these neoconservatives saying, well, if Kim Jong-un insulted us, we should just go in and bomb that country in the Stone Age. You're going to call yourself a moral authority and advocate killing 25 million slaves and hostages to show what a tough guy you are?
That's my next question. You've been there. You've written a best-selling book on it. I hate Kim Jong-un, but the poor people, it's like, what do we do? You've been there. I mean, these people are literally on another planet. What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer. The only thing we can do is put pressure on China, and China has started to buckle, which is a very good sign. It's easy for North Korea when it's us versus them, when it's the U.S. imperialists, as they call us, versus them. But now when you have the international community uniting, including their big brother China, that's a very different dynamic. And it's the better dynamic, because why is this our problem entirely?
And you're an expert on this. Let's talk about the North Korea-China relationship. Why has China been going along with this for 50 years?
China doesn't want a U.S. ally on their border. China doesn't want 25 million North Korean refugees crossing the river and living in China when they have nothing to offer. And China basically no one wants a collapsed state on their border that they have to basically deal with the problem. So, they have to give them some amount of cover. But at the same time, China, who's trying to carry themselves as a gentleman on the world stage, they don't want to defend some college kid goes there as a tourist and comes back in a coma. So
China's the ones with Foxconn suicide nets.
Yeah, but China has put pressure on North Korea successfully in the past. North Korea for decades fought having North and South in the UN because they said this is going to make deunification.
So let me ask you this. I mean, are we closer to midnight than ever? Because most experts I talk to say there's nuclear war. It's going to start in North Korea, not the Middle East, not in Ukraine, not on the border of Russia. I mean, what do you think from the experts you talk to? Because, I mean, you're all over the place talking to top experts. I mean, how serious is this? I got 4 children. I want to know.
I think it's your kids are fine. Your kids are safe. North Korea, in their literature, constantly talk about the fact we know we can't win. They say this explicitly. So they're not, listen, everyone talks about how he's crazy and suicidal. He's satanic, like you said. If he's suicidal, they've been around for 70 years. That's taken a long time to kill yourself, huh?
I'm going to play a clip from Fox News. They talk about the relationship between China and North Korea. Let's play that clip.
Well, there's very good news, and that's that the UN Security Council voted 15-0 to impose tougher sanctions on North Korea. The bad news is that they won't make any difference whatsoever, because China has mastered the art of giving us just, showing just enough leg to keep us from imposing any kind of economic sanctions on them. China literally gets away with trade murder because they keep dangling this possibility that they'll help us North Korea. Now, China, on this 15-0 vote, yeah, that sounds great, but we didn't get the sanctions we wanted. We wanted tougher sanctions, but for China to come on board, they watered them down. And there are 2 reasons for it. One's the macro reason. China regards North Korea as a critically valuable ally in peace and war. The second micro region or economic reason is that China's steel industry is a great international weapon. Whether you consider the prices dumping or not, it's a big plus for China. Well, China doesn't have the right coal. It has soft coal. North Korea, one of the few things it has is high-quality anthracite coal that goes into coking furnaces for Chinese steel. So there are all these backstories here that we're not paying attention to.
So, Michael Malice, you've been to North Korea, you've written a book on it. Is that accurate, or what do you say to that?
It's inaccurate. We could just do the math right now. China has, 1 billion people? North Korea has 25 million. So if China went to some military conflict, to call them a critically important ally is simply false. North Korea is not going to be able to help them one way or another.
I mean, North Korea can't produce automobiles.
Yeah, exactly.
They can't do anything. They can't. They have like a toddling mental patient as their leader.
Right, and the other point is, I mean, sanctions aren't going to work. He said we wanted stronger sanctions. Sanctions aren't going to work because the leadership is just going to pass the buck to the citizenry. The citizenry are going to suffer. The only way that sanctions work, in a sense, is creating this air of unanimity in the international community against North Korea. But in terms of functionally, I mean, it's an economic hellhole. You know what I mean?
So let me ask you this, Michael Malice. We're going to go to break, come back and answer this question because, again, you're a best-selling author, leading researcher on this. What do we do then? Because I've got children, people got children. This just goes on in the future. There's this cartoon land that the left makes a joke out of, but it's real people in slave camps. Where does this go with missiles and atomic weapons? And the Clintons gave them the weapons, and then they're blaming Trump. I'm not even defending Trump. I'm defending reality. Why do you blame Trump for what the globalists did? And it's just like, where does this go? Why doesn't the guy do a business deal? Why doesn't he back off? Why does he want to be a communist dirtbag? We have our guest, Michael Malice, best-selling author, michaelmalice.com, dealing with North Korea. I mean, I just sit here watching this crazy town go on, and I get our government's not perfect. It's got problems, military-industrial complex. Okay, it wants to sell weapons. I get all that, but I watch stuff that looks beyond anything and from a hallucination with a crazy dictator strutting around, threatening to nuke everybody. And then last week, Trump's like, okay, let's negotiate. I'll nuke you. I'll blow you up. And it's like, we already dropped atomic bombs on Japan 70 years or 65 years ago, whatever it was. It's like, is there some end to this? Because I don't want war, but at a spider sense level. Michael, I just am really concerned. How dangerous is this?
Anytime you have someone in the country that defies the international law, international as a rogue nation, there's a little bit of danger. However, we do have to realize that they are interested in self-preservation. This regime has held on to power at all costs, including the cost of the lives of the citizenry. So the idea that they're going to go down without a fight, as opposed to using nuclear weapons as a great negotiating tactic and basically make the rest of the world their hostages, is a very different situation.
Elaborate, though, on your main points about North Korea, because you're an expert on it. I mean, what should we know about the spirit of North Korea?
Well, Alex, you touched on it earlier. They have something called the monolithic ideological system, by which they mean everyone in the country thinks the same way and thinks in line with the leader. So they boast about the fact that there's no independent thought in the entire country, that it's the leader, which is a human being, that kid, like you said, who gives the people their political, spiritual life, and that without the leader, basically no one would exist. So it's a very dark quasi-religion that they push on their people. And again, when you're this demigod at the head of a country and you're effectively a billionaire, what would it take for you to, quit your job? It's going to take a lot, and it's going to take a combination of threats and rewards. And Kim Jong-un doesn't want to go the way of Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein.
What are the scenarios for war in North Korea? I mean, if it happens, have you looked at the scenarios?
Yeah, they're all nightmarish. I mean, Seoul, has tens of millions of people just south of the border between North and South Korea. Even if they didn't have nukes, the idea of these huge missiles hitting the city of skyscrapers is a visual nightmare to begin with. They have the deepest subterranean subway system on Earth, so they've been preparing for nuclear war since the 40s. The people are trained, constantly what to do in case what they call the U.S. imperialists invade. I mean, you have school children waiting outside in the middle of the night outside the libraries looking for American spies. So they've been preparing for this for decades. They're taught that we're going to come back and finish the job we started in the Korean War. A lot of these people are willing to lay down their lives. It has the fourth biggest army in the world. So, yeah, maybe some strikes would be very quick, but the retaliation capabilities, we'd have to make sure we take out everything at once, and that's a very, very big risk.
How is North Korea not an advertisement against communism and big government?
I think this is why I wrote my book, because not only is it North Korea, look at Venezuela, what's happening right now. They took this crown jewel of South America. I visited when I was a kid, Caracas. It was beautiful. And they turned it into another hell on earth where, people who are from the opposition party are being jailed, people being shot when they protest. I mean, we're watching it happen in real time, and no one knows what to do about that either. And there's not enough attention going on there. So it's the fact that it's happening again is very, very scary to me, especially as someone who was born in the Soviet Union.
Let's come back into a few minutes on your experience in the Soviet Union, because that's a good comparison. But I don't understand. The left kind of celebrates Venezuela or North Korea. They get off on it. It's like an existential power, or living vicariously through these orgies of government insanity and wantonness. And I point out, hey, England has really bad health care. They come here, or Canada does, and that's a tame comparison to North Korea. They go, screw you, racist. It's free in England. And it's just like, there's not a real reality-based system, and then spoiled brats living in the West bitch and say they want to be teleported to North Korea. So I say, let's move the 10 million Muslim migrants they brought to Europe the last 5 years to North Korea. Would they fix North Korea? We'll come right back with that information. Here's the surprise. Communism is a nightmare. That's like saying breaking cancer is not fun, or breaking car wrecks aren't fun. That's what frustrates me is when I was going to college, and of course I quit because I was already on talk radio and successful in sales, and just, 2 years, like, oh, Jones didn't finish college. Yeah, like Bill Gates or Rush Limbaugh either. I'm not knocking you got a college degree. It's just that I'm sitting there, and it's like it didn't matter if it was like trigonometry, or it didn't matter if it was Texas history they make you go to. It was all like America's bad and free market's bad and Mao Zedong's good. And I'm like, Mao Zedong's good or Lenin's good. How do they continue when every socialist or communist experiment turns into a manifest nightmare, Day of the Dead train wreck? I mean, look at Venezuela right now. Like he said earlier, they should say riches in Argentina, riches in Venezuela. And I mean, per capita, 50 years ago, Venezuela it was doing better than somebody living in Texas. And now it's an abject hellhole. So it is culture. It's politics. It's policy. So talking to Michael Malice, best-selling author, researcher, wrote the book on North Korea. You can find his website, michaelmalice.com, on our loving leader. I don't get how it's like the elephant in the room that collectivism doesn't work and is a nightmare and puts the worst people in charge. And it just continues. And now North Korea, like we said at the start of the interview 30 minutes ago, and then it's Trump's fault. Forget Trump. I'm not going to let them blame Trump, a golf course owner, for a third-generation North Korean dictator that the Clintons gave nuclear weapons to. It's not about Trump. It's about sanity. I am not going to sit here and just let them blame mythical creatures for the nightmare of communism. I mean, how do they juxtapose this? When do they understand that it doesn't work?
Right. And I think it's really funny. It's like Trump has been president for, what, 7 months? And it's like, how haven't you solved the North Korean problem yet? Well, it's been around for 70 years. I mean, and no one, you know, during the Obama years, no one cared that he was basically kicking the can down the road. He didn't know what to do. I don't blame him for not knowing what to do. It's a very, very tricky situation. But again, the fact that when people don't know what to do, their first reaction is to go partisan and attack the other party, that's not helpful, and it's very telling, I think.
It is. So you've been there.
Yes.
Why, not just North Korea. Why does the left still salivate about communism? It's like salivating over colon cancer.
Because I think communism and totalitarianism especially is the only mechanism where you can take an entire country and impose your will and your vision.
So it's a delusional dream. It hasn't been done right yet. Hitler didn't do it right. Kim Jong-il didn't do it right. But they're going to do it right.
I think people are also uncomfortable with the idea that under freedom, sometimes people are going to make choices you don't like. And sometimes people are going to make choices that you would consider to be terrible. And they're not comfortable with that. They have to have their way everywhere on earth as much as they can. I mean, that's just a totalitarian vision of how societies should be, and every society should be.
You've been in North Korea. Talk about what you witnessed. Talk about growing up, you know, in the Soviet Union previously to coming to America. Because I feel guilty when I see Kim Jong-un or a military parade, because I know there's real slaves under that. Bad things are happening, but I can't help but laugh at it. I mean, it's like it's like Jim Jones to infinity.
Well, Jim Jones was voluntary. Those people all signed up to go to Jonestown and so on and so forth. You know, North Korea, they punished the whole family, 3 generations. The founder of North Korea, the great leader Kim Il-sung, said class enemies must be exterminated to 3 generations. You're a dad. If someone takes your kids and says, hey, Alex, put on this clown suit and march down the street, you'd be marching real quick, wouldn't you?
Wow. So where does it go? In your gut? Talk about North Korea. Talk about your experiences, like you said, in growing up in the Soviet Union, which was, I guess, a mild comparison to this, but still.
I mean, I left Russia when we were 2. I have a lot of stories, but Alex, it's nothing compared to North Korea.
So exactly. Talk about that. We got time in this segment. Talk about that.
I mean, by the end of the Soviet Union, and this is starting to happen in North Korea, thankfully, everyone knew it was crap, right? They're told something, and we have some similarities here. You're taught one thing in school, and school being a function of the government and the government ideology, and then you open your eyes and look around, you're like, this is not what reality is like. And it's the same thing in North Korea when they're taught that the world envies us and we're so wealthy. It's like, yeah, it's great that we're so wealthy. Why don't I have food? It doesn't take much intelligence to realize that there's a disconnect between the reality and the propaganda. And at the end of the Soviet Union, but especially when they had access to the West and Western television, and they were seeing how Americans live, they were like, wait a minute, why am I wiping my butt with newspaper, literally? And I'm looking at this show, and on this show, everyone has a maid, and every maid has a fur coat and a car. So, and what's happening in North Korea now is they're seeing television programs from China and from South Korea, and they're listening to crappy South Korean K-pop, the kids are, and it's like, I want to, you know, why am I going to go to jail for listening to pop music? It doesn't make sense. So there's an increasing amount of cynicism toward the government in North Korea, which I think it's what brought down the Soviet Union partly, and this is what's going to bring down the regime, that they're realizing that it's not a god at the top, it's just some fat jerk.
I'll speak about your experience in the Soviet Union, because I want to talk about that, but the paradox of communism and Kim Jong-un and a hereditary dictator, a force-fed, like, chipmunk toddling around. We can all laugh at it, but he's got real people under him. Like you said, he's enslaving, he's killing. I mean, it's not a joke, even though we all laugh at it and then feel guilty. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Yeah, I mean, my family's Jewish. We left the Soviet Union because that's the other thing that the left likes to ignore. These totalitarian dictatorships North Korea is the most racist country on earth. They talk about racial purity constantly, and if you have refugees who go to China and are perhaps sold into sex slavery or something like that, they're forced to miscarry or to abort because they're not going to mix the Korean blood with the Chinese blood. David Duke got his master's in Ukraine, where I was born. So this is a dirty little secret of these totalitarian dictatorships. Progressives like to think, oh, once we run everything, you're not going to have any prejudice or racism. No, no, no. The prejudice or racism becomes the law. I
was about to say, they just spew terms instead of actually looking where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, Stalin took huge populations, forced them to migrate. He took after one ethnicity after another, but they don't like to talk about that. They only want to talk about Hitler. So everyone, and I'm sure...
And we're not... Hitler's bad. It's like there's other... It's not we're saying Hitler's good. Hitler's bad. There's just other... Mao killed more people than anybody in history. But let's talk about that then, because that's the point I was going to get to, is that we have it so good in the West. We're not perfect. I'm not defending everything. I'm just saying we have it so good that there's like this weird love affair with authoritarianism and communism and, all the rest of it. I just don't even understand how the two things even exist when people know this is going on. And there's the paradox. My own children are great people, but myself included, I don't know how to fix stuff like my dad did. My kids, we get lazy. We get appreciative. So there's the paradox of horrible authoritarianism, which is terrible, but then you look at the average North Korean starving to death, looks healthier than a fat American like myself. So I'm just saying, like, we've got our own problems. How do those two things come together?
Well, Alex, you remember when we were younger, one of the big talking points, or not talking points, actual criticisms about the Soviet Union was the KGB, right? All your phone calls were listened to, all your letters were open, people would be spying on you all the time. But now we have the NSA, which is the same exact phenomenon, even worse, and no one seems to mind. So it's just mind-boggling to me how, and this was delivered by conservatives, it's mind-boggling that the people who won the Cold War, the Reagan people, are the same ones who are importing the worst of the Soviet Union to this country.
Well, you know how that worked. First they say, oh, no one's spying on you, it's crazy, when I was covering 20 years ago. Then everybody's kind of conditioned that it doesn't exist, so once it's all admitted, you go, well, I better not complain because kooks talk about it. It's like atrazine, making the frogs, be sterile. We'll just make a joke, and then it's okay that most of the amphibians are dying. It's okay our environment's collapsing because we're going to tax carbon. It's wild. So how old were you when you left the Soviet Union?
2.
So you don't remember much about it.
But I mean, I was raised in a Soviet household. Let's talk about that Google Doc thing that just happened. When you grow up in a Russian household, you are taught to remember whoever has power over you, be aware of it, and realize they're going to use that power for arbitrary purposes all the time. So I was not surprised at all that this Google thing happened. And this is exactly what to expect when you're dealing with people whose vision is, I can't abide any thought other than my own. And if the people I saw people on Twitter, not only they were cheering him be getting fired, and the kid went to Harvard and MIT, he's no dummy. They also, if they had their druthers, he would never work again. For what?
It's amazing. Whereas my ethos was, we are Ulysses. We're going to empower humanity. And I don't want to set America above others, but it's that ideal that we're going to empower. We're going to go to the stars. And it's under such attack. How could the elites attack that idea that my grandmother gave me versus Kim Jong-un? How could someone reject that?
I don't think they ever had that idea. I think their vision of what America should be is basically like a European social democracy where everyone is reliant on the government from cradle to grave to some extent, and we're all in this together. You remember Bernie Sanders was talking about how great it is that there's income equality in Venezuela. Yeah, if everyone's broke, your incomes are...
Everyone's eating their dogs and cats. The zoos have been closed for 5 years. They've eaten the animals. What about this article on Infowars.com? It links through to mainstream news. Governor Brown told the Chinese dictator, president, elected by the Politburo, by the Secretariat, that he wants to model California after China. What? I mean, aren't people threatened by a regime that kills tens of thousands of Buddhists? The left hates Christians. Okay, just kill all them. What about Buddhists? They don't even do anything. But because they like to do Falun Gong, they kill them. I mean, what type of regime? And the left's like, oh, God, that's really sexy. Let's kill Buddhists. I mean, God, that's really sexy, Alex. I mean, don't you want to kill people?
And Jerry Brown has been known for decades as a strong environmentalist. And China's record on the environment is abysmal. You have smog in these cities. People can't even breathe.
Coal, dirt, dirty coal. That's what I'm saying. So what is the love affair with communism and the left then? Is it because they haven't experienced it? I mean, because I just don't get it. It's like the left's like, we really like cancer. We really want it. It's really good. And we really want cancer right now. I mean, I don't understand these people.
I think you have a lot of educated people, overly educated, who resent the fact that they're convinced of their own brilliance, and they resent the fact that others aren't persuaded by their crap. So they think if we can't persuade other people, we're going to force them to listen to what I have to say because I am smarter and better than other people.
Michael Malice, let me ask you this, best-selling author on North Korea. What is the spirit of North Korea? Because, again, I want to take Kim Jong-un out, but then I get it's a bunch of slaves under him, so then I don't. I mean, it's very... I want to make a decision on it. I'm normally a decisive guy, but I get where Trump's at. It's like, what do you do? He's like threatening. I mean, what is the spirit of North Korea?
When I went to a restaurant there, and they had these cheap plastic placemats with like pictures of roses on them, you know, the kind you get in the 99-cent store. And you look at them, and you're like, this is tacky. And then you realize this is these people's attempt to have some measure of beauty when the best place you can shop is Chinese imports.
This is the best they've got.
But they're trying to be human. They're trying to have beauty in their lives and humor and humanity in an inhumane situation. So when you look at them, realize they're not the same as Americans, but they're human beings who love their grandkids and who just want food. And it's not like they're closet jihadis or anything like that. They just want that. Look at South Korea. It's a strong ally.
They're people living in a government cult. And then you see liberals with their restaurants with Mao making jokes and loving North Korea. And it really makes me not hate them. It makes me look at the spoiled, rotten left in America, and I just really, really fear them. I mean, as a man, as a father, I'm going to be honest with you, brother, I want to square up against these people. I am really angry at them because I can't blame the North Koreans. But I look at these spoiled, rotten people that are pissing on America and embracing radical Islam, all of it. I don't know what their problem is. Why are they doing it?
And the disgrace and having no reverence for all of Mao's victims or Stalin's victims or Kim Jong-il's victims. I mean, this is a disservice to the millions of bodies whose names will never be known, who are just thrown in the...
So I'm asking, you're a smart guy, what is wrong with them? Because I'll talk to like a BuzzFeed writer, hey, communism, they'll smile like they get off on like, yeah, you're next. It's like it's like they're into the evil. What is it?
I think they have their own barely disguised faith where they think that they are the evangelicals who are going to proselytize and conquer the world and basically bring on...
Exactly. They're going to be stomping our guts out and raping our wives in the gulag.
Yeah, and they're all on a power
You're
trip.
smart. That's what it is. It's like some weird existential death orgy thing.
Yeah, they have their vision of how the world should be, and they're going to force it whether you like it or not. And other people are going to have to pay the prices for their vision.
God almighty. It's just, as bad as America is, thank God we're here. We got our problems,
yes,
but man, I am so sick of America being run down constantly when you just see hell. I've been to a lot of foreign countries, and it's just a lot of great countries as well. Oh, wow. Well, tell folks about your book, because you've written a lot of books. You've ghostwritten a lot of books, too. You're like a prolific writer. Well, what are the top books folks can read from you?
The most important book is Dear Reader, about North Korea, because this is the issue where right now, you might remember, Alex, you remember the Iraq War and the ramping up to that very well. So if people want to be informed on North Korea and not listen to the nonsense that's being put out there in the corporate press, you'll get some understanding, all the understanding you need of how this country really works.
Well, where do you think this ends? Just gut level. I mean, where's this going?
This is two cars racing at each other at high speed, a game of chicken, and it's going to be who blinks first. And Trump's not one for blinking, and Kim Jong-un's not one for blinking. So this is uncharted territory.
So we got Mad Max and Toe Cutter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
This is not good. All
No.
right. Well, Michael Malice, michaelmalice.com, Twitter, Michael Malice. Thank you so much for your time. Please join us again.
Thank you.
Oh, old Trump's come out today and says they're making tremendous headway. North Korea's statement wasn't tough enough. We're going to come back from break and play this.